The relationship between India and Pakistan has been defined by hostility, mistrust, and bloodshed ever since the two nations emerged from the bloody partition of British India in 1947. What began as a territorial dispute quickly evolved into one of the world's most intractable rivalries, rooted not only in geopolitics but also in ideological divergence. While India chose to pursue secular democracy, Pakistan sought to define itself as a homeland for South Asian Muslims, a choice that created both internal instability and external aggression, particularly towards India. From the very outset, Pakistan was dissatisfied with the division of territory, particularly over Jammu and Kashmir. Within months of independence, Pakistan sent tribal militias backed by its military into the princely state of Kashmir, which led to the First Indo-Pakistani War. The result was a UN-brokered ceasefire that left Pakistan in control of a portion of Kashmir, while India retained the rest. This uneasy status quo has remained one of the central flashpoints in the subcontinent. In the decades that followed, Pakistan sought to challenge India through direct military conflict, covert operations, and, eventually, state-sponsored terrorism. Perhaps the most significant military confrontation came in 1971, when Pakistan, then comprising West Pakistan and East Pakistan, attempted to suppress Bengali aspirations for independence in the east. The crackdown resulted in the deaths of hundreds of thousands of civilians and sent millions fleeing to India. India, under Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, intervened militarily, supporting the Mukti Bahini resistance and launching a coordinated offensive on both eastern and western fronts. The result was a swift Indian victory. East Pakistan was liberated and became the sovereign nation of Bangladesh, while over 90,000 Pakistani soldiers were taken prisoner. This was a crushing blow to Pakistan's military and a turning point in South Asian history, reinforcing India's status as the dominant regional power. Following the humiliation of 1971, Pakistan's strategic thinking underwent a transformation. Realizing that conventional war with India was unlikely to yield favorable outcomes, Pakistan, especially its powerful military and the inter-service intelligence, increasingly turned to asymmetric warfare. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, Pakistan began sponsoring jihadist groups that could strike India from the shadows. These groups were not rogue elements, they were carefully cultivated by the Pakistani state to act as so-called non-state actors who could destabilize India, especially in the disputed region of Kashmir. Among the most notorious of these groups were Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed, both of which would go on to carry out devastating attacks against Indian civilians and institutions. One of the most tragic outcomes of this policy was the genocide and forced exodus of Kashmiri Pandits in the late 1980s and early 1990s. Islamist extremists, backed by Pakistani handlers, unleashed a campaign of terror in the Kashmir Valley, threatening, torturing and murdering members of the Hindu minority. Temples were desecrated, homes were looted, and thousands were killed. Hundreds of thousands were driven into exile, becoming refugees in their own country. This brutal ethnic cleansing remains one of the darkest chapters of modern Indian history, and one that the international community still largely ignores. Despite such provocation, India remained committed to peaceful coexistence. It held on to its founding values: democracy, secularism, pluralism. India is home to every major religion, hundreds of languages, and countless ethnicities. It has absorbed these differences not with fear but with celebration. From its ancient scriptures to its constitution, India's ideology has always been based on acceptance, compassion, and equality for all. Unlike Pakistan, whose state institutions have repeatedly enabled jihadist ideologies, India's strength lies in its diversity and tolerance. It is this civilizational ethos that has been under attack, not just its territory or citizens. Another dark days in India's recent history came on the 13th of December, 2001, when armed terrorists attacked the Indian Parliament in New Delhi. The assault, carried out by members of Jaish-e-Mohammed and Lashkar-e-Taiba, left 14 people dead and brought the two countries to the brink of full-scale war. Though war was narrowly averted, it became increasingly clear to the world that these terrorists were operating with the blessing, or at least the complicity, of the Pakistani establishment. Yet even that outrage paled in comparison to what would happen in Mumbai 7 years later. In November 2008, 10 Lashkar-e-Taiba operatives launched a multi-day siege on India's financial capital. High-profile sites such as the Taj Mahal Palace Hotel, Oberoi Hotel, Chhatrapati Shivaji Terminus, and a Jewish community center were attacked in coordinated strikes. The carnage left 166 people dead, including foreign nationals. The attackers used GPS and satellite phones, and their handlers were traced to Pakistan. Despite international condemnation, Pakistan offered little more than token arrests and hollow denials. India's frustration grew. With every new attack, whether in Delhi, Pune, Pathankot, or Pulwama, the evidence pointed back to Pakistan. In September 2016, after militants killed 19 Indian soldiers at an army base in UAE, India responded with surgical strikes on terrorist camps across the line of control. This marked a turning point in India's counter-terror policy, signaling a move from strategic patience to proactive defense. Still, the attacks did not cease. The Indian government remained under intense domestic pressure to act decisively, especially as public anger mounted over Pakistan's repeated use of terror as state policy. The situation finally reached boiling point in April 2025 when a gruesome attack unfolded in Pahalgam, Kashmir. The assault, carried out by the Resistance Front, an offshoot of Lashkar-e-Taiba, targeted a group of Hindu pilgrims and local civilians. The sheer sectarian nature of the attack, its timing during a peaceful cultural procession, and the brutality with which it was carried out shocked the conscience of the nation. For many Indians, this was the last straw. For decades, India had exercised restraint. It appealed to the United Nations, engaged in back-channel diplomacy, and maintained a defensive posture. But the Pahalgam attack laid bare a bitter truth: terrorism emanating from Pakistani soil was not an accident or a deviation, it was a consistent and deliberate strategy. A strategy rooted in Pakistan's belief that militant groups could be controlled and used as leverage without consequences. Even after the killing of Osama bin Laden in Abbottabad, a mere stone's throw from Pakistan's military academy, the world remained skeptical of Islamabad's claims of innocence. The Pakistani state's protection of figures such as Hafiz Saeed and Masood Azhar, despite them being listed as global terrorists, further eroded its credibility. India's response to Pahalgam, and to the long chain of attacks that preceded it, is not born of sudden outrage. It is the result of decades of patience exhausted, of wounds reopened time and again by betrayal and bloodshed. Every restraint exercised, every peace overture extended, was met not with reciprocation, but with renewed hostility. Now, India stands at a historic crossroads. What follows may reshape the region for generations. But let it be remembered with absolute clarity, India did not choose this war. It was thrust upon it, not for conquest, not for revenge, but for justice. Like Rama, who sought peace but could not ignore Ravana's evil, India too must confront the truth: some threats cannot be negotiated, they must be neutralized. And so, India acts. Not out of hate, but out of duty. Not to dominate, but to uphold Dharma, justice, truth, and the right to live free of fear. The era of passive endurance is over. India will no longer be bled by 1,000 cuts. It will defend its people, its values, and its sovereignty, with resolve, with purpose, and with the unshakable conviction that peace cannot exist without justice.